him with a federal immigration law violation, as prosecutors routinely do in such investigations, Iowa's federal prosecutors sent out United States Marshals with handcuffs to have him arrested on October 30th, 2008. The photos were, as you can imagine, very dramatic. A heavily bearded man being brought in with handcuffs. Now, could that have been done not in the interests of justice, but in the interests of publicity? Oh, the federal prosecutors are honorable men. And most of American Jews watched and remained silent. Sholem Rubashkin was treated like no other defendant ever arrested for immigration law violations. The federal prosecutors demanded, and the federal magistrate granted, that he be outfitted with an electronic ankle bracelet, the kind of restriction that is reserved only for those who are caught trying to flee the country or who may endanger others if they are free to travel. And no sooner was he released than he was arrested again, charged this time not with immigration violations, but with bank fraud. What was the fraud? That when agri-processors had applied for the $35 million line of credit that enabled it to do business, Sholem Rubashkin had certified that the company was complying with all laws. Since it employed illegal aliens, said the federal prosecutors, this was fraud. It was a lie. And they also claimed that by advancing money that belonged to agri-processors and had been legally paid to agri-processors and advanced to the Postville Yeshiva and to its kosher grocery store, Sholem Rubashkin was in some manner defrauding the bank to which he was making full, timely payments on agri-processors' loan. Why add bank fraud charges to the illegal immigration allegations? Simple. Bank fraud carries a much longer prison sentence than immigration law violations. Could the federal prosecutors have been trying artificially to raise the possible punishment for Sholem Rubashkin as to have him suffer prison before he was even tried? We know federal prosecutors are honorable men, and most of American Jews watched and remained silent. Why, when the federal prosecutors arrested him immediately on bank fraud charges, did they ask that he be imprisoned and not released on bail? Why did they tell the federal magistrate that since Sholem Rubashkin is Jewish, he can flee to Israel and become an Israeli citizen immediately and not be sent back because of Israel's law of return? That was false and outrageous, but it persuaded the federal magistrate to deny bail, and Sholem Mordechai sat in prison unjustly for 76 days. But the federal prosecutors are honorable men. You would be sitting here from this time until the time came for Kriyas Shema Shel Shachris, if I described for you all the other ways in which these honorable men did dishonorable things. Just a few notable illustrations. Never have I been in a case in which a federal prosecutor saw fit to keep filing new indictments, 7 superseding indictments in this case, just to make it look as if there were more and more criminal charges, when really it was the same charge, just fragmented into minute separate counts so that the accused will look more guilty to the media, to the public, and ultimately to a jury. And most of American Jews watched and remained silent. Never in the history of the United States has there been a case in which anyone has been charged criminally because he paid a cattle dealer a few days late for cattle that he had purchased. The federal prosecutors saw fit to add such a criminal charge under a 1926 law that had never been criminally enforced, on the ground that Sholem Rubashkin paid late, even though he paid every cent he owed to cattle dealers, a few days late. American Jews watched this and remained silent. The prosecutors resisted moving the trial of this case out of Iowa, but the federal judge finally had no choice when she read the responses that potential jurors had given to a questionnaire testing their prejudices. Was the trial moved to Chicago or to Minneapolis, as the defense requested, where it was most likely that the jurors would not be prejudiced by media reports in Iowa? No. The judge moved the trial a few miles across the border into South Dakota, a location that had been influenced by the Iowa media. No objection from America's Jews. They remained silent. There are so many ways in which Sholem Rubashkin's trial on 91 federal counts was unfair. I will be dealing with those issues in his appeal from the outrageous 27-year sentence that Judge Reed announced in a written opinion today. I won't detail those grounds for you tonight, but I do have to comment on the sentencing process. The prosecution initially requested that Sholem Rubashkin be given a life sentence. When they heard of this recommendation, 6 former attorneys generals, 2 former solicitors general, 25 former United States attorneys signed a letter of protest. I personally spoke with some of the former attorneys general, and they were outraged by the prosecutor's request. So the prosecutors toned down their demand. They told Judge Reed that 25 years in prison is enough for this crime of bank fraud. The crime of drawing more than Sholem Rubashkin was entitled to draw on a $35 million line of credit that he never exceeded. And remember, until agri-processors went bankrupt because of the raid, it was paying timely interest on every penny of the amount it borrowed. The prosecutors who made this recommendation are, to be sure, honorable men. What did Judge Reed do in these circumstances? Did she take account of the fact that for a 51-year-old man, the 25 years the prosecution was asking for was equivalent to a life sentence? Did she ameliorate the punishment in the slightest because of family considerations or because Sholem Rubashkin did not intend to cause any loss to the bank? This was a test of how well the American judicial system works. Now, make no mistake. We live in a Malchus Shel Chesed, where Jews have been given rights and liberties and freedom unparalleled in our history and goals. We cannot expect American justice to be administered by the standards of the Sanhedrin or of historic Batei Din. We learn those standards these very days on the pages of Daf Yomi that's being studied around the world. Would Sholem Rubashkin's payment of timely and full interest on agri-processors to the agri-processor's bank for any excessive draw he improperly made on the line of credit be punished at all if American law followed the principle discussed in the Mishnah in yesterday's Daf Yomi, that kol mitzvos lo saseh sheyesh bo kum b'aseh ein chayavin aleho. A prohibition, such as the taking of an excessive draw, that's corrected by an affirmative obligation, such as paying full and timely interest, ein chayavin aleho. American law shows no similar compassion for the wrong that can be made right, nor does American law consider whether onshin min hadin or mazhirin min hadin. Once one looks at Daf Yomi, by the way, it's remarkable that on the very day set for Sholem Rubashkin's sentence, the daf, today's daf, today, almost out of the blue, in the midst of discussing Lav Haba Michlal Essay, cites Rava's proof from the Pasuk in Re'eh that defines kosher animals. V'chol behema mafreses parsha v'shosah shesha shtei prosos mal askera v'behema oso tochelu.